Happy midnight, little stars. I hope all of you are having a wonderful day. Welcome back to another episode of Professor Moonshine's Redstone 101. Today is episode 13, and in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the concept of quasi-connectivity, or QC for short. Now, quasi-connectivity might sound a little intimidating, like it's a big scientific word, but I promise you guys, it's actually quite simple, so let's head on over to the Redstone lab and check it out. So, what exactly is quasi-connectivity? Well, this right here is an example of quasi-connectivity, and it refers to a situation where some redstone components get powered even though the power source is especially far away from them. This looks like a bug, but I promise you guys, it's actually an intended feature of Minecraft. So in this example of QC, this piston is getting powered by this redstone block even though the redstone block is really far away. If I were to take the redstone block away and update the piston, it retracts. Now, there are only 4 redstone components that can be QC powered. They are the dispenser, the dropper, the sticky piston, and the regular piston. For the purpose of keeping this video simple, I'm only going to be talking about pistons and using them as examples, but keep in mind that all 4 of these components are capable of being QC powered. So now, let's return to the example of this singular piston and examine what is going on that's allowing this piston to become powered. So let's pretend that this red glass right here was some imaginary redstone component. Any redstone source or interaction that would power this imaginary component is going to QC power this piston. And that's pretty much it. That's the fundamental premise behind QC powering. If the block space above a piston becomes powered, then the piston becomes QC powered. You can see this in action if I were to place a redstone torch on this block. A redstone torch would power a component in this block space, and so the piston is going to become QC activated. Another example is that if we run a signal into this block right here, which would normally power a component in this space, we'll see that the piston also gets QC activated. I think it might need an update here. There we go. Now, there are 2 ways in which a component can be powered by quasi-connectivity. The first is called immediate QC activation, and the second is called update QC activation. We're going to talk about immediate QC activation first. Immediate QC activation is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's an instance where a piston becomes powered by quasi-connectivity and it recognizes this immediately. We've already seen the example of placing a torch in such a way that it would activate this imaginary component. Another example would be running a repeater or comparator into this block space. And remember, glass is not a block that can become powered, so this piston is not receiving any power from the glass, it's receiving it from QC. So this is what immediate QC powering looks like. Now let's go ahead and take a look at update quasi-connectivity and see why it's different. Update quasi-connectivity refers to situations such as this where we would expect a piston to be QC powered, but for some reason it's not powered. So here we can see we're running a signal directly into this block, meaning that our imaginary component would ordinarily be powered, and so we would expect that this piston would be QC powered, right? Well, it should be. It just doesn't realize it yet. The reason being that a lot of redstone components only cause block updates to blocks in their immediate surroundings. So even though we should be QC powering this piston, we haven't given it the update that lets it know that it's QC powered. In order to fix this, we could just give it a block update and we can see it immediately powers. Similarly, if we take away the power source, the piston doesn't realize that it's no longer powered, so we need to give it a block update to get it to retract. Hence the name update quasi-connectivity. A block update can take many forms, but it usually just involves changing the surrounding environments of the piston, such as placing or breaking blocks, or changing the state of an adjacent block. Events like these cause Minecraft to have to think about what happens to neighboring blocks. All this kind of leads us to the question of how do I know if a certain scenario is going to be immediate QC activation versus update QC activation? As a general rule of thumb, if our imaginary component is being powered by a powered block, then it's probably going to be update QC activation and not immediate QC activation. So here, this imaginary component is receiving power from this block being powered, so this is an example of update QC activation. And redstone blocks tend to behave just like powered blocks, so here it's a redstone block that's powering our imaginary component. This is another example of update QC activation. And pretty much all the other direct methods of powering this imaginary component are considered to be immediate QC activation. So once again, if our imaginary component block is being powered directly, it's going to be immediate QC activation. And if the imaginary component is being powered by a block, then it's probably going to be update QC activation. And that's pretty much all I have to teach you guys about quasi-connectivity. See, I told you all it wasn't so bad. Nevertheless, let's go ahead and review what we learned. Quasi-Connectivity, or QC, refers to a situation where a redstone component becomes powered indirectly from redstone above it. The easiest way to understand QC is to pretend that there's an imaginary component in the block space above the original component, and that when this imaginary component would be powered, the original component is powered by QC. QC only affects droppers, dispensers, sticky pistons, and regular pistons. Now, there are two types of quasi-connectivity. There's immediate QC activation, and then there's update QC. Immediate QC activation is when the component is immediately aware of what's going on. It will activate as soon as the block space above it would have activated. By comparison, update QC activation means that the component hasn't yet realized that it's supposed to be powered, and we need to update it before it will realize that. In general, update QC activation occurs when the imaginary component's redstone source is a powered block. Any other kind of direct powering component results in immediate QC activation. And that's pretty much it, so let's go ahead and move on to a quiz. Here we have problem number 1, and my question for you guys is, when I flick this lever, is the piston going to activate? I'll give you guys a minute to take a look at the circuit, and feel free to pause the video if you feel like you need more time. Got your answer? Great, let's check it out. I'll go ahead and flick the lever. Oh. And we can see that the piston did not fire. If you answer that the piston was not going to fire, then good for you, you got this question right. And if not, no worries, we'll go ahead and go over it right now. So it's true that the piston should be receiving QC power right now. However, because it's coming from a powered block as a source, this is an example of update quasi-connectivity. And in order to get this piston to fire, we need to go ahead and update it. The same would be true if I were to turn the circuit off. The piston doesn't yet realize that it's supposed to be off, and we would need to provide a block update to get it to retract. Importantly, it does still get QC activated. It's just not immediate QC activation. Anyways, let's move on to problem number 2. So here is problem number 2. Imagine that we're in my base and we're trying to set up a cool kitchen area that will automatically dispense food from these dispensers when I press the button. Is this setup right here going to work? Why or why not? As always, you guys can take a minute to look at the circuit and feel free to pause the video if you'd like to think more about your answer. Got your answer? Great, let's give it a shot. So the way it's currently set up, my beef dispenser is going to work just fine, but my carrot dispenser won't. So if you knew that the carrot dispenser was not going to work, then good job, you got problem number 2 right. And if not, as always, we'll go over why that is. Currently, this powered redstone dust is in turn powering the block below it, which is QC powering this dispenser down here. The same would be happening for the steak dispenser, except for the fact that we have a repeater right here, meaning that this block doesn't get powered. And for our last problem, I'll go a little bit easy on you guys. The question is, will the piston right here be QC powered by the circuit? You guys can stop to consider the circuit and feel free to pause the video if you feel like you need more time. Got your answer? Awesome, let's go ahead and flip the switch. The correct answer was that yes, this circuit will QC power the piston. This repeater right here is basically running a redstone signal directly into our imaginary component space, which would QC power our piston. And that's going to do it for today's video. QC is a really cool part of Redstone, so I hope you guys had fun and learned a lot. If you have any quasi-connectivity related questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get to as many as I can. Now, today's episode is a little bit special because this is going to be the last episode in the Redstone 101 series. So if you have watched all episodes 1 through 13, then congratulations, you have passed Redstone 101. And Professor Moonshine is very proud of all of you. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed today's video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, but no worries if not. I look forward to seeing you guys in future videos, and as always, shine on, little stars, shine on.